Okay, if you're a Rush fan, I think you're going to really enjoy this video. And if you're not a Rush fan, this will make no sense to you at all, and you may as well. I know on YouTube you shouldn't tell people not to watch your video. I'm just warning you, if you're not a Rush fan, and especially the earlier Rush, it just won't make any sense what I'm doing here. So to tell you what this is, on January 14th of 1980, that's when Permanent Waves was released. And it was, of course, their 7th studio album. And not long after it was released, a critic in the Edmonton Journal wrote kind of a negative review about the album. And so then a whole bunch of fans wrote into this newspaper and complained that this guy had no idea what he was talking about, and complained about this negative review that they've been given to Rush. And so what the Edmonton Journal did is they said, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a contest, because Rush was going to be coming in concert there in March of that, just a few months after it was released, there in March. And so they said, here's what we're gonna do. We will give tickets away, free tickets, to people who can write the best reviews for the album Permanent Waves. And they'll give 4 sets of tickets to the people that win, whoever can write it, and they'll print it in the newspaper. And then the people who don't make the top 4, they'll give them, I think they were going to give them a copy of Permanent Waves and a picture disc of Hemispheres, I think is what it was. Anyway, so what I've got here, and this is why if you love Rush, especially in that period, this is so entertaining, because what this is in essence is for all intents and purposes, fans that wrote their own review about Rush and about Permanent Waves. And it's anyway, I think you'll get it. When I read this, I thought it was so much fun reading this. I thought this was a blast. So I'm going to read these 4 reviews to you. And as you listen to this, see, because they're all a little bit different how they see it, and see which of these you actually relate to. And if there's anything they say in there about the review and about Rush in general that makes sense to you, and put that in the comments. Okay, here it is. So the title of this thing is, it says, Reviewers Come Out of Closet. And so the first one is from this first fan. It says, it's titled, Rush Plays Some of the Best Music I Have Ever Heard. Okay, and here it is. A dim ember symbolizes Rush's first 3 albums, Rush, Fly By Night, and Caress of Steel. The albums consist of good hard rock, but some shabby lyrics, peaking in Caress of Steel. 2112, the trio's 4th album, is an expression of powerful music with the advent of a more refined writing style. The musician's integrity surfaces, the embers glow. The flame is alight. A Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, and the group's latest release, Permanent Waves, concentrates on the band's fundamental attribute, its music. The band members produce some of the best music I've ever heard. They have proven they are among some of the finest musicians in North America. Neil Peart, percussionist extraordinaire, creates more rhythmic patterns in his double bass and snare alone than most drummers dream of pounding out on their entire kits. His style is crisp, accurate, and complicated. Alongside Neil is Geddy Lee, vocalist, bassist, keyboardist, and part-time 12-string guitar player. The two are as inseparable as Siamese twins. Geddy is not afraid to play, and unlike most bass players, he is not content to lurk in the background. He plays powerful, choppy, rhythmic, and harmonic licks, and could easily solo while providing a steady, regular rhythm. Neil and Geddy complement each other to near perfection, which forms the solid foundation of the group's music. Guitarist Alex Lifeson, though somewhat tamed down on Permanent Waves, gives the band its unique Calliopean heavy metal form. His style is exciting, rhapsodic, and always interesting. Rush consists of instrumentalists in every sense of the word. This is why Neil can write the lengthy, meaningful lyrics he does at no sacrifice to the band's music. Okay, I'll admit that Geddy's voice may take a little getting used to, but his expression far exceeds that of a great many vocalists. He is definitely the right man for the job. Who else can you envision singing the Temples of Syrinx in Cygnus X1? And you know what? That's right. The Temples of Syrinx, It's just so good. And I never had a problem with his voice. I read so many people that just struggle listening to him, and I just never once did I loved it from the moment I first heard it. Okay, that's not important. All right, here we go. If you're tired of the commercial trip and you want to hear some real music, then get out to the Coliseum Sunday and hear the best around, rock Rush style. And that's from a guy named Dave Crandall from Fairview. Okay. Now, here's a second review. So first of all, anything in there that you relate to? I want to get your feedback on that. Okay, second review. Permanent Waves, a new high reached in musicianship. Permanent Waves, the latest album from Toronto heavy metal rockers Rush, may not be the best album the band has made, but it is certainly one of the best. And although it is perhaps not as, scrolling to the top, not as innovative as last year's Hemispheres, the musicianship of all three band members has with this effort reached a new height. There are, however, isolated highlights and disappointments, and for this reason, it is worthwhile to examine the songs individually. The opening song, Spirit of Radio, has been released, albeit in an unnecessarily butchered form, as an AM single. Now, just a side note here, if any of you know, what they must be saying here is they must have had a shortened version of the song that they put out as a single originally. I don't know about that. I think the only one I've ever heard is the full-length version of the song. But as you know, back then, a lot of popular music was played on AM, not FM. It was actually just kind of right after this era that things started moving into the FM world. Everybody was listening to popular music on AM. So anyway, if you know about this, put it in the comments, because I didn't know that was the case, that there may have been another release done as a single. Okay. It is undoubtedly the most commercial song the band has ever recorded. But staunch fans need only heed the lyrics should they have any fears the band may be contemplating a downward trend geared to the whims of the airwaves. The best part of this song is the reggae ending, which even in its brevity proves Rush to be far more versatile than critics will admit. Free Will, one of my favorites. Okay, Free Will contains the most explicit statement of the objectivist philosophy embraced by the band that they have ever recorded, but never becomes didactic. Musically, the song returns to the basic Rush motif of churning guitars and growling bass. This is probably the best cut on the album in the way it exposes the individual talents of all three men. Geddy Lee's bass is brought to the foreground as an excellent intro to Alex Lifeson's brilliant guitar solo, and Neil Peart's percussion is absolutely unparalleled. Jacob's Ladder is the album's only real disappointment. The lyrics are, as always, poetic and meaningful, and the dulled guitar introduction and thunderous drumming near the end are wonderful. However, the other 5.5 minutes of the song are spent in self-indulgent esoterica, the like of which has not been heard since Xanadu from their 1977 album A Farewell to Kings. Having rid ourselves of this one slight departure from the general excellence of the album, we are free to enjoy the smooth second side. Entre Nous is an intelligent song of love, equaled only by Geddy Lee's Tears on 2112. The resilience throughout the song on harmonic power chords is reminiscent of the band's raw first album, and the vocals are among the best Lee has done since Fly By Nights in the End. Different Strings, Lee's lyrical contribution to the album, is harmed only by his rather unenthusiastic presentation. He really doesn't seem interested in his own lyrics, and one is tempted to wonder why. The song is more than redeemed, though, by the excellent guitar work and surprising addition of their art director, Hugh Syme, on piano. I don't know if that's how you say his last name, but... The album closes with the title song, which at 9.5 minutes is nothing less than majestic. The first part, Tide Pools, has running throughout it the sound of gently flowing water and contains simple but aurally pleasing acoustic guitar work to exclusion. Listen to the way the chorus leaps in without warning. listen to the superb lyrics, and listen finally to the pounding of the permanent waves at the end of the song. And whatever your opinion of the band, it will be difficult to deny that they always strive for quality. And on this album, they prove themselves to be a band that will be a major force for a long time to come. And that was Gerald Michael Wandio from Edmonton. Okay, so that's the second one. And I'm trying not to put too many of my opinions in here, but anyway, it's so interesting listening to this as they piece together and talk about all these things. So again, was there anything in that review that jumped out to you that you thought was particularly interesting that you relate to? Okay. Now, next one. They'll be remembered as Canada's finest rock band. All right, here it is. Rush is one of only a handful of rock groups around today that is not afraid to use rhythms other than 3/4 and 4/4. They quite successfully experiment with 7/8, 7/4, and 5/4 timings. The reason they experiment is that all three band members are highly skilled musicians, both in writing and playing. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson write exceptionally good music, with, in some cases, a rhythm change every bar for stretches of 10 bars. Neil Peart writes thought-provoking, imaginative lyrics. They usually deal with topics related to space travel and exploration. As for playing, Lee's bass talent is unmatched in contemporary rock and roll. It is not the dull, often heard note-a-bar stuff in most of today's music. Instead, it is usually a counter melody intertwining with that of the guitar. Now, by the way, just as a side note, so many people talk about the fact that when they first heard Rush, they couldn't believe it was a three-piece band. And this is part of why. Because Geddy Lee, the way the tone on his bass, it was kind of out front, and it just had this big in your face, and it wasn't kind of sitting in the background. It moved around, and it made that sound so big. Okay, let's see here. Instead, Lee's vocals are very interesting and unrivaled. His voice sometimes squeals with eerie excitement, and sometimes it is as soft as a lullaby. Lifeson's guitar playing is actually image creating. The flowing sounds emitted from his guitar etch pictures in your mind. His licks and runs are definitely original and memorable. The guitar is sent through various fuzz boxes, which give it a sound that is very spacey to go with the lyrics. Peart's drumming is, to say the least, stunning. Some of his runs leave you breathless and wondering what just hit you. When listening to a Rush album, one must be awake and paying attention, because they will undoubtedly catch you off guard with an abrupt key, rhythm, tempo, or loudness change. They're certainly not predictable, as are so many of today's groups. On to Permanent Waves. This album has got to be their best to date. The songs are shorter and down to earth, figuratively and literally. The Spirit of Radio, the current AM hit, is of course about radio in Toronto and how a station kept good music alive. The very interesting part of the song, where the band experiments with reggae, proves how versatile these people really are. Okay, it keeps going. The next cut on side one, Free Will, threw a bit of philosophy at me. One of the lyrics of the song is, "If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice." That one makes you ponder. And it is a side note. I wonder if this happened to you too. Because I think the first time I heard this, I mean, the album came out, I was only, 10 when this album came out. So I wasn't really paying attention really to stuff like this. But by the time I was hearing it, I was probably 13, 14 years old when I first really discovered Rush. And I heard the song Free Will, and that line, "If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice." I swear to you, every few weeks or whatever, I'm having conversations with somebody and that line just comes into my head based on something somebody said. And weirdly, as a young teenager, that little philosophical statement is just kind of ping. It's been there now for however long ago that would have been, 40 some odd years. That thing's just been rattling around up in my head, that one line. So powerful. Anyway, the fact that he said that in this article, and I had a similar experience as a young guy. I wonder how many of you have had that lyric specifically, or any Rush lyric, but that one really, that just kind of has stuck with you. Okay. Entre nous, which means between us for all you Anglophones, is surprisingly a love ballad. Here, Mr. Lee tries his hand at lyrics. One can tell he is truly a sensitive man from his words. Perhaps the best cut on the entire album is Natural Science. The first part of the song, entitled Tide Pools, is about the microscopic universe left behind after the tide has recessed. It draws a picture in your head with lyrics and musical style. The second part of the song, entitled Hyperspace, compares the human society with that of the tidal pool, how they are both mechanized and patterned. The final part, entitled Permanent Waves, suggests that if we aren't careful, science will completely take over. We are left thinking that the primitive natural way of life is much safer and will keep the human race on the face of the earth longer. I greatly admire the work of this trio. They will surely be remembered as Canada's finest rock group, and that's Glenn Archibald from Edmonton. And by the way, before I read this last one, I do have one other question. There's a couple, so far in these things, there's been references to how amazing Neil Peart is as a drummer. Again, I didn't start paying attention to this stuff until probably the early, close to the mid 80s. And by then, Neil Peart was a legend drummer. I was a young guitar player, and so I had a bunch of drummer friends, and it was always talk about him, right? In this era, in the 70s, and this would also go for you specifically that are musicians that would have been really paying attention to this stuff, was Neil Peart already seen that way as this superstar drummer, or did that become obvious and become more known as we moved into the 80s after this? Or was that already part of the general consensus before this stuff came out? Anyway, I'm curious because the fact that they both referenced it makes me wonder if that was part of just the kind of the collective knowledge around Rush. Okay, last one. Rush's lyrics are unlike Disco Wimp's garbage. Okay, now remember, this was written in 1980. So that makes a very important context why they would even talk about it this way. Permanent Waves was an album that took many avid Rush fans by surprise. The musical style created by the album's instrumentation lends a music lesson to the listener. The lyrics of this and all Rush albums often cause many critics to describe them as too philosophical or simplistic. Rush's lyrics provide the listener with a vividly descriptive picture about the concept and storyline of each song. Rush produces lyrics from experience, personal thought, and inspiration, rather than compromising with the silly, repetitive garbage lobbed at us by the disco wimps and frantic convulsions of the new wave cause, end of the sentence, new wave cause. Let's see here. Side 1 begins with The Spirit of Radio. The band displays a flowing style that differentiates itself 26 times during the song. It contains a nice reggae piece followed by an excellent solo by guitarist Alex Lifeson. That's so interesting that was it all 4 of these now that mentioned the reggae part of that song? Because it is pretty interesting, that little departure right at the end. Let's see here. And then it goes, quote, "For the words of the prophets are written on the studio wall, concert hall," is the band's thanks to its growing following for their support. Free Will is an experiment in efficient music, filled with Neil Peart's unique style of precision percussion and Geddy Lee's accurate bass. They both accent a masterful guitar solo by Lifeson, who is untouched by his use of tone, speed, vibrato, and appropriate distortion and synthesizer choices. Jacob's Ladder is but another chapter to the Book of Cygnus, X1. This song is truly an overture. About 2 minutes into the song, Lifeson displays his monstrous vibrato and superhuman speed in the song's short but effective solo. Peart is the major force through the song. His heavy flowing style adds to the song's boisterous tone. The effects of the song are well planned and accurately selected. Side 2 begins with Entre nous, short, sweet, and perfect. There's little to say about this tune except it displays the distinct Rush style. Different Strings is an excellent song that deserves AM radio time for a change. The song begins with a melodic acoustic interlude which is carried over to the electric guitar and built up throughout the song. Natural Science obviously is the best song on the album. It incidentally contains the album's title in its third section, Permanent Waves. It is precise and perfect. The words are not to be glanced over. Peart still shows his fluent style in this song. He proves his exceptional talent, especially in the section called Hyperspace. Lee's bass is obvious, and rightly so. It isn't lack of talent he displays by his masterful use of the Oberheim polyphonic, Taurus bass pedals, and distinctive singing. I want to explain what we're talking about right here, just so you know, if you don't know. By his masterful use of the Oberheim polyphonic, the Oberheim, Geddy Lee used Oberheim synthesizers. And that's what he's talking about there. And the Taurus bass pedals, it says Taurus bass pedals, and then it lists bass pedals again. Basically, Moog had these, it was for all intents and purposes, a little keyboard that would just sit on the ground with these big keys, and you just play them with your feet. And it freed Geddy Lee up to play the synthesizer and still keep the bass line going with his feet, or play a guitar or what, play something else and be able to still maintain the low end. And that's what they are. And a lot of bands use these things, and they were just called Taurus bass pedals. And so that's what they're talking about here. And then it says distinctive singing. Anyway, just think, if you didn't know what those two things were, I was referring to. Lifeson never ceases to amaze me. He has to run through the song with his articulate and super speed, but still has time to put a few challenging solos in to further astound the fans and blow away the competition. Rush is coming. Be there. And that's Alan Pasder from Edmonton. Anyway, I'm curious if you relate to any of those things. When you hear what they had to say, each one of them had some different stuff, and there was some kind of, a couple of people didn't like certain things about it, and it was interesting to see who liked what more than others. And anyway, I thought that was so interesting. And if you're a Rush fan, and especially if you know this early stuff, because Permanent Waves was 1980. I mean, they were yet to put out moving pictures and really, really become huge. And so anyway, I thought we'd enjoy that. So please leave your comments. Obviously, please follow the channel, like the video, and with that, have yourself a fantastic day.